Welcome to Officiants Online, a virtual forum for professional wedding officiants to share their expertise. I'm Marissa. I'm the Marketing and Events Coordinator at AMM. Today I'm here with my co-host Jessica, AMM's lead writer, who will be helping out behind the scenes. So please send her a message if you have any technical questions. Today we're joined by Officiant Tara McMullen-King. Tara has been planning and officiating weddings for over 6 years. She's an eclectic witch and initiated Wiccan priestess of British traditional witchcraft and an ordained minister of American Marriage Ministries. Tara is also a member of the International Association of Professional Wedding Officiants, or IAPWO, and the Salem Chamber of Commerce. Her continued education includes intensive coursework with the New York Institute of Art and Design, and she's certified by the Association of Bridal Consultants, ABC, the world's largest professional wedding planning organization. So now let's hear from Tara, and then we'll open things up for questions. So I'll go ahead and get Tara up here. Just one second.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining me today. I am so blessed to be here today. I have to apologize in advance. My cats don't like it when the door is shut, so they will probably try to sneak in. So if you see the door open behind me, it's not ghosts, although I do have those. It's just cats. I do have a slideshow to share today, so I am going to pull that up now, and we will get started. I'll do a quick little introduction, and then we'll go through the slides. So like Marissa said, I am Tara McMullen-King. I live in Salem, Massachusetts, the Witch City, as many call it. Getting ready for October this year, which is always mayhem and foolishness, but a lot of fun. I am affectionately known as the Wedding Witch of Salem. I was given that moniker by a couple of local folks, and it kind of stuck, and now it's become part of my branding, so I'm not going to complain. My company is Witchy Woman Weddings, again, based here in Salem, Massachusetts. And today I'm going to talk about some witchy wedding elements for custom ceremonies, but I'm also going to kind of talk a little bit about what paganism is, what a little bit about Wicca is, in case people are kind of unfamiliar with some of those terms. And we're going to go over a bunch of different sort of unity rituals that can be done, as well as some fun kind of things that you can incorporate into your ceremonies if you have folks that are interested in things like that. So to get started, so who am I? I know Marissa already kind of said a little bit of this. I officially started Witchy Woman Weddings. I launched it Valentine's Day of 2020. We kind of know what happened in March and beyond in 2020. So things were definitely a little bit slow as I got started. I did kind of start it as a passion project, a side hustle. I originally started the firm specifically to work in event planning and coordination for people getting married here in Salem. And as I started to gain more clients, they established a good rapport with me. They started to like me. I guess I'm likable. And they were like, is there any way that you could officiate our wedding? And I had several clients ask me that. So I decided to actually pivot the business. And now that's all I do. It's just officiation. And I love it. So I am a former Protestant. I grew up in the Protestant church and I pivoted. Now I am an eclectic witch. As the introduction said, I am an initiated Wiccan priestess in the Alexandrian branch of British traditional witchcraft. It is an initiatory mystery religion. It's passed down from person to person. My lineage goes back to sort of the dawn of Wicca in England and the UK in the 50s and 60s. It's an oath-bound tradition, meaning that people who are not initiated don't have access to some of the materials and the books, which are copied by hand over the course of years. So that's kind of my background in terms of Wicca. I've also spent 10 plus years studying many different esoteric topics. I like to read. What can I say? I like to learn in the fields of Wicca, witchcraft, all sorts of different magic traditions, folk magic, ceremonial, various forms of divination, tarot, scrying, you name it. I've tried to study it. Some I'm better at than others, and lots of other esoteric subjects as well. My full-time gig is in the fundraising industry. So it's just another way that I help people. I work for a prospect research and data analytics consulting firm based in the Boston area that works with nonprofits all across the country. So that's my full-time career. And then the wedding stuff is just my passion project because I love helping people and I love to work with people. I actually was married. I'm married to the love of my life. His name is Stephen King, fun fact, which people get a kick kick out of. Our first date was a Friday the 13th in downtown Salem, so I am a Gothic stereotype. Totally works. He is wonderful. We live in Salem currently. As I said, we have our 2 black cats that are probably going to creep in here, and a menagerie of benevolent spirits in our very, very old home. And they're very nice, and they might join us today too. So that's me. So now that we did that, let's get into the good stuff. So I have found, at least in my experience, working with other officiants and also working with couples, that a lot of people kind of have a really narrow idea of what a wedding ceremony should be or should look like, based on maybe limited experience with ceremonies they've had in the past, and sometimes just simply erroneous views. I've had lots of couples come to me. Sometimes it's their second marriage, and they've met each other, and they said, the first time around I did it in the church, and I did what my parents wanted me to do, and that didn't really reflect my beliefs or my experiences at that time, but I did it because I wanted to please them. And this time around, I want to do it in a way that reflects me. So the first thing I usually say is there's only a handful of rules to make it a legal ceremony. The rest, we can throw it all out and we can start from scratch, which I think is terrifying and exhilarating for people at the same time, knowing that there's not really a lot of rules in terms of what your ceremony has to look like. We can make it match what they want. It's kind of exciting. I will say that sort of writing and officiating a pagan ceremony does offer a very unique opportunity to create a ceremony that is deeply personal, it's deeply meaningful, and that really does reflect that couple's belief and values if they sort of follow that path or have those interests. The caveats, and I'm not going to there's so many things I can talk about today, so I'm just going to focus kind of on a few that I think are kind of worth mentioning and maybe worth kind of piquing your interest in ceremonies moving forward. The caveat is sometimes a lot of people who really strongly identify with a pagan or a Wiccan path, many times they will want to choose an officiant for their ceremony who is a fellow practitioner, who is someone that kind of, also follows the same path, not just for comfort, but just sort of for maximum impact, so to speak. So some elements are probably best performed by someone like myself or like some of you who I know are also in that field. But there's a lot of things that can be kind of stripped down and still applied, even if you're not like a super witch or whatever. So we're going to talk about some of those as well. So when we talk about the idea of someone being pagan, originally that term sort of referred to people who were adherents of, these polytheistic religions back before Christianity became the dominant force in terms of religion in the world. These days, the term sort of is used more broadly to encompass a very wide range of beliefs and practices that fall outside of sort of the Abrahamic religions, which are Islam, Judaism, and Christianity. Modern pagan movements can sort of be placed on a spectrum, so everywhere from Reconstructionism to eclectic and Wicca and Druidry and other paths would sort of fall under the eclectic side of that spectrum. The key point here, and the reason why I'm mentioning all of this, I'm not going to get a dissertation about religion. I'm not qualified to do that. But although they may share similarities, a lot of contemporary pagan movements don't share a single book or a set of beliefs or a set of practices. It's a very diverse group of practices and religions. There are some sort of common themes that you will see many times across them, including polytheism, animism, and the idea of sort of rites and rituals being performed by individuals or in groups. But the reason that I mention this is that if you have a couple come to you and they say, "Oh, I'm pagan," or "Oh, I'm Wiccan," it's not an apples to apples kind of situation. So you're going to have to dive a little bit more deeply into what flavor of paganism, do they follow? What are their beliefs? Because it's not just as simple as, oh, they're pagan, let me just write this ceremony as X. You're going to want to dive a little more deeply. So Wicca, when we talk about Wicca, Wicca falls under the broad umbrella of paganism. It's an earth-centered practice of witchcraft and worship of nature. There's a lot of elements of the gods and goddesses, spirits in the natural world, the celebration of cycles and the moon and the seasons. Followers of Wicca may be solitary practitioners, meaning that they practice alone, or they may practice with a coven. I previously had 2 covens here in the Salem area that I worked with. Another key thing is not all witches consider themselves Wiccans. but in my experience, all Wiccans consider themselves witches. So that's an interesting thing too, because I have had couples come to me and usually the bride will say, I'm Wiccan. And I'm like, oh, cool. Yay, sis. Like, let's talk about stuff. And then as we're having conversations, I come to realize, oh, she doesn't really practice the religion necessarily. It's not a worshipful thing. She just practices witchcraft, which is a practice. So again, you kind of want to talk a little bit more to them and kind of figure out, okay, before you get into start writing a ceremony that's completely off base. Like I said, questions, and research. It helps to sort of have a basic understanding of that spiritual path that's followed by the couple so that you can create a ceremony that truly reflects them. That's all about customization, right? Ask them questions that allow them in their own words to sort of describe their beliefs, their practices, their experiences. When you take those answers, it's going to give you a better understanding of sort of where they fall under that umbrella, under that spectrum. And if they mention something that in those conversations that you're like, I have no idea what they're talking about, ask them a follow-up question or do your research. Do a little bit of research, Google it. There's a lot of great resources out there. Wikipedia, if nothing else, can help kind of, get you some of the information that's going to help you. So these are some sample questions. These are very similar to the questions I actually ask my own couples. How do you define your path or belief system? How did you come to identify with this path? Are there deities or energies you work with? Do you honor spirits or ancestors as part of your practice? Are there regular practices or rituals that are important to you? Are there aspects of nature or the earth that resonate with you? Are there mythologies or cultural traditions or tools or symbols? Sort of trying to get at sort of what does their practice look like? What is their belief system? And how can you potentially take those ideas and use that and translate that into a ceremony that's going to be meaningful for them and honor their traditions and their practices? So in witchcraft, words carry immense power. They are not just a means of communication, they are tools of manifestation. We as witches use them to sort of shape reality combined with intention and focus. Words have vibrations that can influence energy, and that's kind of where that comes from. When words, like in a wedding ceremony or a handfasting ceremony, when words are spoken with clear intention, focus, belief, and emotion, they align with the practitioner's will and they're able to direct energy towards a desired outcome. And that is all witchcraft is. It's harnessing energy and it's taking that power to try to achieve certain goals, to try to achieve a certain outcome. That's really what witchcraft is. It's using energy and manipulating that. And words have energy and power. So in a ceremony for pagans, Wiccans, people, of those faiths, words tend to be very sacred and very central to creating that intentional experience. So that means that the words that you use, the words that they include in their vows or the vows that you write for them, and the overall language, the words should be chosen within care, spoken with intention and purpose. And that's very important. So how do we sort of talk about intentional language? So crafting their vows, I usually encourage my couples to write their own vows and focus on their own intentions. A lot of times they say, I want you to write them. And so I do. But that's when it also helps to kind of know them a little bit, better. Affirmation of intentions. Vows are an affirmation of those intentions, and the act of speaking them aloud in a sacred space, sometimes surrounded by loved ones, solidifies those intentions. And incorporating symbolic language that aligns with their belief systems as well. These are all important. Blessing the space. So in a pagan ceremony, the officiant will typically light incense or herbs, call to the gods, goddesses, spirits, etc., and cast or create sort of a protective spiritual circle. There's lots of different ways to do that. A circle is not mandatory for a wedding ceremony. I've done a lot where we didn't cast a circle, and it was fine, and they're still married. Surprise. But some people choose to cast a circle, so that may be something that a couple will ask you to do. There's simple and complex ways to do that. It can be cast with tools or without, lots of different ways that you can do that. I'm not necessarily saying that your couples will ask you to do this, but it's usually a very, very typical part of pagan weddings. So it's important to at least kind of understand that if your couples ask you for this, this is what they're referencing if they want a circle or blessings cast. An altar. So in pagan ceremonies, typically will feature an altar. It may have meaningful items on it that are sort of personal things, photos of ancestors, or tools that are going to be used, ritual objects that are going to be used as part of the ceremony. Each altar is going to be different. So of course, the items that they include are going to kind of depend on the tools being used and the various rituals being performed within the ceremony, as well as just personal items that the couple might want to put on the altar itself. Many times the altar will be right in the middle of a circle or the main ceremony area. But I've also had people, cat, get down, who kind of cast it off to the side. Again, this is personal preference. It's usually in the center. So invoking and honoring, a common theme is that many pagan faiths embrace many different gods and goddesses and spirits. Oftentimes the officiant will call in these entities or forces at the start of the ceremony to sort of observe and bless the union and the rituals and the ceremony that are going on, as well as ancestors and beloved spirits as well. Oftentimes the couple will offer offerings to their gods or spirits or ancestors that they're calling to, again, to try to offer them these blessings so that they will come in and bless and observe this union. It's usually simple objects like herbs or fruits or wine, but the couple usually will choose those. You can make recommendations as well, depending on who they're trying to get the blessings from. Take a sip of my coffee. So most pagan wedding ceremonies are going to include or acknowledge the four elements in some way: earth, air, fire, and water, sometimes spirit as well. Some couples will choose objects to represent the elements on their altar and then provide offerings to them. Sometimes an officiant will just call the elements from different directions. Other times just reference them within the ceremony itself. So there's different ways in which you can do that. Typically, so it's the east, spring, air is the correlation, south, summer, fire, west, autumn, water, and north, winter, earth. So there may be variations on that, but that's a lot of this. The same traditions kind of use those correlations as well. When the officiant calls on the elements, they'll usually ask that element to bring certain guidance or power in the form of certain qualities that each of these elements are known to possess. And these are some examples here that I won't get too deeply into, but this is sort of some of the correlations and the qualities that are called upon when we call in the elements. Crystals. I love crystals. I have a collection. It's a little crazy. I'm a crystal freak. It's fine. So crystals have been used for centuries to harness energy, bring out desired outcomes. They are an actual physical representation of longevity, fortitude, and then commitment, right? A lot of them have been around for way longer than you or I. Integrating them into a ceremony can amplify the impact and bring some good energy for the couple as they head into that, marriage or that long-term union. A lot of people do believe that crystals hold properties, metaphysical and healing properties. So ask your couple, are you into crystals? They can be placed on an altar. They can be incorporated into bouquets or other arrangements. I've had couples place them in a pouch that they would put in their bra or their pocket, sort of using that energy to sort of focus their intentions during the ceremony. I've had folks on their hand fasting cord, if they're doing a hand fasting, have crystal beads or charms sort of added to those. There's a lot of different ways that you can incorporate that into the ceremony as well. So these are just some examples of some of the metaphysical properties of some pretty popular crystals. Again, not going to get too deeply into this. If you want the slides, I can send these to you. So rose quartz, sodalite, rhodonite, selenite, lots of different sort of choices here, depending on the qualities and the energies that you want to bring to the union. Ooh, skipped one. Herbal smoke. So some couples like to do a smoke cleansing ritual either before or within the ceremony, using herbs that may have symbolic meanings that are meaningful to them, or meanings that typically are associated with purification and protection and different blessings they want to bring into that union. You can create a custom blend of those herbs, and we'll get into some of the herbs that resonate with the intentions and the energy that you're trying to pull in for the ceremony. There's different ways that you can use the herbs. You can create a bundle and sort of tie them together with some natural string. You might have seen bundles like this, usually sage. I'm going to get into sage in a minute. Usually bundles, they're kind of wrapped. People burn it. Woo! They do the witchy woo thing. Seen on like the Real Housewives too. Sage is like so popular right now. So you can create a bundle. Loose herbs. If you have a fire safe container and a charcoal disc, you can burn loose herbs on top of that. It does create a lot of smoke, so just be advised. Or herbal incense. I've had people just actually use, and I've used incense, actual incense sticks or incense cones made from certain herbs. Tends to be a lot easier and a little bit less smoky, and it smells really good. It doesn't smell like burning leaves. So sage. So using sage and Palo Santo, which are very popular as well in ritual smoke cleanses, has become a little bit controversial. I'm not going to get into major details about it, but there's issues of cultural appropriation, over harvesting. These are sacred herbs to different practitioners in different areas. If you Google it, you will find out. I would recommend, if you can, it's best to use herbs that are not tied to specific indigenous cultures and that perhaps are local to your area. That's my little 2 cents and my little soapbox. So if you can, I would recommend avoiding sage and Palo Santo, but you can do whatever you see fit. If you can't use smoke, this is a fun little thing that I started doing. I've worked with a lot of venues where they were like, oh, absolutely not. You're not lighting anything on fire, especially not anything that's going to create all this smoke. I actually found these really cute essential oil diffusers on Amazon that are waterless and they're rechargeable. And you actually can blend the oil, pour the oil in, and it just diffuses it through the air. So I've actually gotten essential oils that are different herbs and such, made my own blends, and we've actually had that going during a ceremony as well. Kind of the same effect. And it smells really good, which is lovely as well. So just a little pro tip. Herbs. These are some different herbs. Again, not going to get into super detail about these, but common ones we would use would be rosemary, lavender. I've used bay leaves. Mugwort is one of my favorite, and in lieu of sage. Frankincense and myrrh, but like witches love frankincense and myrrh. Usually you would use the resin, like the incense resin, but those are used by a lot of practitioners. They smell really awesome, and they do have properties as well. So those are great too. So when would you do this smoke ritual? So it could be done at the very beginning of the ceremony to cast a sacred circle or purify the space. I've also done it during the ceremony before they exchange their vows or following the reading. So basically to ground them and center them before they make those promises verbally to each other. You can also do it as a blessing at the end of the ceremony to sort of say, okay, now you're starting your married life. Like, let's send you off, on the right cleanse and like to start your life together. Different methods for if you are burning the herbs, or you could do this with a diffuser to raise that bundle or bowl. You can pass it around the couple. You can walk in a circle around them. There's a lot of different methods out there. And I think in my experience, I've done ceremonies where there were like a lot of people and like the family members were like, what on earth is this crazy woman doing? What is she lighting on fire? What is going on? So I have found that if you have a larger ceremony and people are going to be really confused about what's going on, it helps to kind of explain it and introduce what you're doing. So people are like, oh, that's what they're doing. And then they kind of get into it. So in all things, whenever I do ceremonies where it's not just like a little elopement, it's the couple, when there's like a larger audience, I usually will take the time during the ceremony to explain in a sentence or two what it is that I'm doing and what the meaning is behind it. And it gets people really kind of intrigued and on board rather than perhaps intimidated or frightened as well. So smudging, you hear the word smudging a lot. Drives me nuts. So this is again my soapbox. The term smudging is often considered really culturally sensitive and can fall under the umbrella of cultural appropriation. The idea of smudging, the term smudging, is a sacred ceremonial practice with deep ties to Indigenous folks in North America. When non-Indigenous people use the term smudging or engage in that practice without being someone of those cultures, it can sometimes be seen as disrespectful. I think it's okay to do it. I personally avoid the word smudging. If even one Indigenous person is like, I'm offended by that, I'm not going to do it. I prefer to use the term sort of cleansing ritual or incense blessing and just kind of explain that it's similar and inspired by those Indigenous practices, but it is different, just to be culturally sensitive. Again, that's my sort of take on things. You can disagree with me, and that's okay too. So I usually just call it incense blessing or something like that. Handfasting. Oops. Handfasting. I'm sure most of you have heard of handfasting. I know AMM has a wonderful guide to handfasting, so I'm not going to get super into the technicalities of it because I feel like there's other resources out there. It's often referred to as an ancient Celtic ritual. The reality is that the practice has a really long, kind of complex, sometimes opaque history. There's lots of people that disagree about the origins of it. Again, not going to get into that. You can do your own research. But sometimes with pagans and Wiccans, they will use the term hand fasting simply to refer to a wedding or a marriage ceremony, not just the act of sort of tying the wrist, but the actual larger ceremony is known as a hand fasting. So that's an important distinction to kind of make. A traditional pagan hand fasting ceremony, it's a full ritual. It's got all of those elements. It's got consecrating the space and usually calling upon spirits and talking about the elements and cakes and ale ceremonies and a lot of other sort of elements. So if you're working with a couple and they say, I want a hand fasting, again, it helps to understand, are you looking for a traditional hand fasting ceremony or are you just looking for the ritual itself incorporated into a larger ceremony? So again, helpful to make that distinction. Variations. So it's not a close practice. There's no cultural appropriation in my mind for it. The idea of sort of fasting hands and knots is seen in many traditions and cultures around the world. It's definitely a lot more popular now. People from all religious denominations, you don't have to be pagan or Wiccan or Irish or Scottish or English or what have you, to experience a hand fasting ritual during your ceremony. In practice, Wiccans and pagans are, because of the way that we approach intention and words and etc., the way that we intentionally do things as part of ritual, the knotting of the cords is very meaningful. It's almost extra meaningful because we understand the impact of that activity. Because of that, when people are pagan or Wiccan, that ritual really invites a unique magical experience. Again, you don't have to be pagan or Wiccan to experience the magic, but sometimes there's a different meaning behind it for people that's part of their practice. Each ceremony, hand fasting ceremony, is unique. The tying, the knotting can be done in lots of different ways to reflect their requirements. I have 6 different ways that I have a whole guide that I created that I share with my couples. When they say, I want to do a hand fasting, I'm like, okay, here's a guide, and it explains the history and the color associations and everything. And it also has diagrams of different knots and videos so that they know, oh my gosh, there's not just one way to do it. There's a lot of flexibility here. There's some versions of hand fasting ceremonies that are repeated over and over again because you can Google them and you look them up and that's great. But I feel like the true beauty of creating a hand fasting ritual is that you can really work with the couple to make it reflect them. You can craft it with fresh words and new words and really have it reflect what it actually means to them. You can use sort of, what you find online as a baseline and then kind of make it your own and personalize it for that couple. Drink up. So another thing that's really popular is a quake or a loving cup ritual. It's a ceremony act often used in weddings to symbolize unity and commitment. The quake, it's pronounced quake, it's an actual 2-handled Scottish drinking cup. A loving cup is a very similar vessel that's outside of Scotland. You'll see it in many other countries as well, referred to as a loving cup. The idea is that it has 2 handles. So the vessel with a loving cup or quake ritual, I often do these right after a hand fasting. So I'll go right from the hand fasting into a quake or loving cup. The vessel is filled with a meaningful beverage. So in the choice of, if you're doing a quake and you have people that, are myself, look at me, I look like Merida from Brave, who, are based in this sort of Scottish culture, they may want to use Scotch because and Scotch is delicious. I've had other couples decide to use mead or decide to use a non-alcoholic beverage. The choice of beverage really doesn't matter, but it doesn't have to be wine. It doesn't have to be Scotch. It can be really anything. It could be Fanta for all I care. Whatever kind of means something to the couple. The idea is that they're drinking from this cup. Usually there's some sort of vows or blessings involved. And with the 2 handles, there's different variations on it. Sometimes the person will take the 2 handles themselves and drink. Sometimes the one person of the couple will hold one side and the other person holds the other. So they're both holding it at the same time. Lots of different variations, but it's beautiful and people love it. Plus, who likes to, have a little beverage in the middle of your ceremony, right? Sometimes, especially in smaller ceremonies, you may have that the vessel pass to other members of the wedding party. They may enjoy it too. Or if it's really, really small, maybe all the guests. Sometimes I've had couples do a Quaker loving cup ritual, and then everyone who was seated in the audience also had a shot or had a drink. And so it was like a toast to the couple, which is kind of fun too. Also, some couples incorporate other elements into that. They may add a simple pinch of salt or add some honey to the beverage before drinking it. There's lots of different variations there, but it's beautiful. Broom jump. So many couples like to jump the broom at the end of their ceremony. In many cultures, it kind of makes sense, right? The broom has a significant sort of symbol in terms of making a clean slate or sort of sweeping things away. That's literally what brooms are used for. So it's actual in practice. Yes, you can actually sweep your floor, but it actually has some meaning behind it as well. The idea of the wedding broom is really popular within the sort of Celtic diaspora and the African diaspora, but it's very, very common in pagan and Wiccan handfastings as well. Some scholars have traced the whole broom jumping tradition, specifically within the pagans and Wiccan sort of crew, going back to this Welsh custom called a broomstick wedding. I will say that when I refer to a broom jump with my couples, I typically say a besom jump, which is a term commonly used to refer to a broom. Also, sometimes when you say broom jump, I've had couples say, isn't that more for like Black weddings? Isn't it African? And I say, well, there's actually other cultures that also do something similar. But within, like as a witch, I have brooms, many brooms. I refer to them as besoms. So that's just kind of a way to kind of make that distinction as to what you're doing. Just a little tip. The way that it works is basically at the conclusion of the ceremony, before the couple heads back down the aisle, they literally jump over the broom to much fanfare to symbolize their sort of, leaving things that are negative in the past, jumping together into their shared future, symbolizing sort of their willingness to overcome anything that they're jumping into as a team, as a pair. After the ceremony, many couples will actually store the broom at the front or back door of their home to symbolize a threshold, or in a corner facing west as well. Some people think that you need to shake the broom out once a year or regularly because it's believed to catch bad luck. So it's a little superstition, but I guess it works. I've actually had couples build the broom together, which is kind of fun. And then they hang it up in their home, and it's similar to a handfasting cord being sort of displayed. They can see that broom as well. Lots of different things. Color magic, again, not going to get too crazy into this, but the idea of using colors and incorporating colors and color theory into the ceremony is very popular. There's lots of different meanings associated to some of these colors. Many of them correlate with the chakra and aura color meanings as well. The idea of color magic is each color sort of has different vibrational frequency, and you can use various colors and combinations to invoke and attract a set sort of vibration of energy that you want. So this can kind of translate into the colors that the couple chooses in their wedding, the colors in their handfasting cords, the colors that you wear as an officiant, lots of different ways you can use color. And then some other simple ideas, incorporating astrological signs of the couple into the theme or to the rituals, referencing the current moon phase, symbolizing kind of their journey, mentioning how if the moon is waxing or full or waning or new moon, how does that relate to the ceremony itself, including symbols of the sun and the moon in the ceremony, representing balance and harmony. Chants, leaving scrolls with like a little prayer or chant on the seats of the guests, and having them involved in the ceremony and somehow, again, words have power, right? Incorporating natural imagery in the vows or in the rest of the script as well. Seasonal inspiration, so referencing the season in which the wedding takes place and trying to relate that to the cycle of life and love. Like in the spring, it's like renewal and growth, right? Ringing a small bell or chime at the very beginning or the end of the ceremony to sort of symbolize clearing the space and sort of inviting in that positive energy. Lighting a ring of candles around a couple if it's small, and if you're allowed to light candles, whatever venue you're at, sort of symbolizing warmth and protection, passion, things like that. These are some other kind of little fun ideas that are witchy, right? That you can incorporate. I think this is the last slide that has content. I'm sorry, I could talk forever about this, but I guess it's not a bad thing, right? I'll have to do part 2 sometime. Some other simple sort of unity ritual ideas. A lot of them involve unity candles. So a lot of couples like the unity candles candle thing. There's ways that you can make it sort of witchy. So having candles that represent the four elements, if they're doing a unity candle ceremony, the couple could light their candles from those elemental candles before lighting the unity candle together. Having two candles to represent God and Goddess, which is important to certain faiths. They would light their candles from these unity candles and then light the unity candle, anointing the candles with oils. You can also use those oils they can anoint each other. Seasonal rituals, so calling in, the energies of that time of year, engraving symbols onto the candles. Two other fun unity rituals that I've done would be an oath stone, which is an actual stone the couple makes their vows over. The idea is that stones are believed to carry the power to hold and seal oaths that are made. And some couples will keep that stone in their house too, or like in their garden or something, or ring warming, which is really fun too, which is very inclusive. It gets the guests involved. And basically it's passing the wedding rings from person to person. And the idea is that the person's going to hold those rings and sort of imbue them with their good wishes, their blessings, their positive energy before the couple exchanges them later. So it's just adding that extra oomph energetically from all their loved ones. I think that's the last slide. And that's it. Yeah, 38 minutes, not bad. As I said, this is my contact information. You can find me on the gram. You can find me on the face space. That's my website. And this is my email address, witchywomanweddings@gmail.com. I think that's it.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Tara. We're going to go ahead and just leave that up for a few minutes so everybody can get your contact information. But now we're going to go ahead and transition into the question and answer portion of this session. So during the Q&A, you can raise your virtual hand for us to call on you, or open the Q&A tab to type in your question in the panel. You can also type your question into the chat and we'll keep an eye out there. So who's got questions here? We do have a question here. As a minister, people ask me to perform baptisms. Do you have a baptism certificate?
I do not. I have not done that. It's something that I've actually been thinking about looking into, and also to do perhaps memorial services as well, but I currently do not. Yeah.
Okay, we have quite a few comments here just saying great presentation, well done, fantastic. It was very fascinating. I learned a lot for sure. And Audrey had a question. Can you talk about the range of outfits you've worn at witchy weddings?
Oh, goodness gracious. I do like some fashion. So I would say, honestly, my typical also being a witchy lady who loves black clothing. It's kind of I always say leopard print is like the only real color that I like. I usually have a series of black dresses, or I also have a black like minister robe. And I usually will ask the couple, I will tell them, I have a whole questionnaire that I send out to my couples. I actually have several questionnaires. And I usually will say to them, I typically wear a black dress, or I can wear a black robe, or is there something else that you would like me to wear? I have had people say, oh, girl, witch it up. I've worn a witch hat. I've worn lots of, Stevie Nicks it up. I feel like a lot of times the folks, I'd say 90% of my clients that I've worked with come to Salem from other states. So they're coming on sometimes from Canada, from Europe. So they're coming to Salem to get married or handfasted because they want that like Salem experience. And I think they want all of this, and they want the witchiness, and they want all the Salem vibe. So I'm always willing to indulge them. So I usually will ask, usually I wear a black dress, but is there something special you would like me to wear? And then I go from that. I typically wear a lot of crystal jewelry because that's just kind of my thing. Yeah, I usually just wear black. I have a ton of it in my closet, so.
Makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Let's see, we have another question. When you go from handfasting to the loving cup, how or when do you remove the cord?
Oh, yeah. So usually at the end of the handfasting itself, I will say something like it depends on the kind of knot they're doing, right? Because some of them are knots where I physically will probably take the cord from them. And then there's the other ones like the infinity knot where it's like, and they tie it, and usually they'll kind of hand it back to me. And at that point, I usually will say, let all of the good blessings and energy, spoken about today be imbued in your cord, blessed be. And then we move on to the loving cup kind of thing. So I do kind of finish off the hand fasting, and then we move into the next section.
Gotcha.
Yeah. My cat wants to say hi. Hi, break it down.
Oh, hello. Let's see. And then we had a question. Would you be able to share the questionnaires you send to your clients with somebody who inquires, or maybe some samples?
I can definitely share an example. It's pretty basic. I mean, I think with me, when couples find me, I always, so 6 weeks out, my process is, this is just my process. So 6 weeks out, I email it's a Google form. And I actually have 4 different ones. I have one for elopement. I have one for larger ceremonies. I have one for elopements where there's not going to be anyone else there. It'll just be the couple and myself, because I won't ask a lot of the same questions on all of those different ones. And then I have one specifically for my pagan and Wiccan couples that ask more specific questions about what tools do you want to use, and do you want to bring things? Do you want me to bring things? So again, my whole practice it's all about dialogue, conversation, me asking a ton of questions and doing a lot of research. And that's how I just try to meet the needs of those couples. I can certainly share some links to the forums if people would be interested. Yeah, feel free to send me an email and follow up, and I'll send you something.
Sounds great. Okay, we had another question. Let's see. How are most folks finding you? Google, Instagram?
I'm really lucky, I have to say. I think even within, you would think that there'd be a lot of Taras in Salem, and there aren't. So I think I designed my own website in Wix. My website usually is how people are finding me, and they're finding me on Google. So if you type in like Salem wedding or Salem elopement or Salem handfasting, I'm usually in the first page of results. I've tweaked my SEO over time. I did some research and took classes on SEO optimization and things like that. So I've tweaked my own website. I have never been on Wedding Wire or The Knot or any of those other sites, because for me, I feel like what I do is so niche and so kind of specific that I don't, plus I don't want to, frankly, I don't want to pay the money. This is a second job for me. So if this was a full-time gig, I might be interested in taking out ads and really sort of marketing my services more broadly. But for the moment, people are just finding me on Google. And actually, I have an inquiry form on my website if you go to my website. So when couples fill out that inquiry form to sort of start the conversation, the process with me, I have a field where I ask, how did you hear about me? And it's a drop down. So it says Google, Instagram, Facebook, vendor referral, etc. And I would say 95% of the time it's Google. So I'm lucky. But I'm lucky because I'm also Salem. And so people want to come to Salem and they're like, well, let's get married. Oh, here's a witch. Let's get into it, kind of thing. So I have that blessing of that. Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. Let's see. Another question. Do you give crystals to couples, or do you bring some for the ceremony space?
That's a great question. Sometimes I do, and sometimes I don't. Sometimes, again, a lot of this is dialogue. A lot of this is asking the couple. They may have crystals that are personal to them that they want me to use. But I do have my own collection that I've assembled over. I've said I'm a crystal freak. I really am. I have a whole collection of various things that I will, if the couple says, can you help me build an altar? And we want crystals, then I give them options and I say we could include rose quartz, so we can include this, and I show them sort of pictures and what the sort of meanings are behind it. So I definitely can curate that for couples. There have been times where I have specifically purchased crystals to use in a ceremony that I then will gift to the couple so that they can keep it. I'll usually put it in like a little silk bag or something, and then I will give that to them so that they can take it home.
I love that.
Again, it just depends on the couple, really. And I will say that the variety of couples that I work with, it's very, very diverse. It's very diverse. I don't just do pagan and Wiccan type ceremonies. I do sort of spiritual but not religious ceremonies where the folks don't necessarily want all of the maybe religious references, but they really love crystals or they like the earth. And so they still may want to incorporate some of that. But yeah, so to answer your question, sometimes I do give them to the couples if I specifically purchase them to use. Other times I have couples bring their own, and then usually I will bring out my whole haul and sort of give them options. You can shop from my collection, right? My curated collection.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. We have a few others in here. So how do you kind of like keep things in the wedding from looking a little too, out there or costume-esque, and just like also keep it on brand but tasteful for the wedding? Do you have like Any go-to style guides for that, or do you leave it up to the couples for their discretion?
I kind of leave it up to the couple. I think for me, it really depends on the audience too. Like if it's just the couple and myself, or the couple and myself and a few trusted, loved ones who kind of understand that the couple is following these paths. And so they're not going to be like freaked out, for lack of a better word, or anything going on. I will keep it really authentic, and I will keep it intense, and I will keep it spiritual, and I'll keep it very meaningful, because that's how I practice, and I want to bring that same energy and intention that I do in my own work to that. um I have done, let's say, witchy ceremonies for couples who weren't sort of out of the broom closet, which is what they call, like, when someone's not like publicly out that they're, non-Christian or etc. And I have had couples say, we want to incorporate some of these things, but we don't really know how to do that without like grandma freaking out or something like that. And I have found that there's usually ways, again, I think I referenced this in the presentation, to explain what you're doing and explain the meaning behind it. I think if you all of a sudden launch into something that's like, I don't know, calling in the elements or casting a circle, and people are like, what is this witchy woo-woo craziness? But if you explain what you're doing and the meaning behind it, I think they'll be more on board. And I think in those ceremonies, I would keep it what I call like pagan light. Like I would reference certain things, and maybe it'll be like a nudge, nudge, wink, wink between myself and the couple. They know what I'm doing, and I know that they know what I'm doing, but no one else really needs to know. It's kind of just for them. I don't know if that helps.
No, that makes
Again, it
sense.
really depends on the couple. And this is why I always have meetings with them. I have Google Meets, I have questionnaires, we exchange emails. So by the time I do their ceremony, and I always give them a draft. That's the other thing too. A week before their ceremony, every couple gets a draft. And I use their questionnaire answers. I use previous conversations. I use information gleaned from meetings. I wrap it all in. I use my own kind of witchy woo and my intentions and intuition, to try to craft something that I think is going to be great and match what they're looking for and match that vibe. I always send them a draft so that they then can read about, like, read the draft, react to it, and say, hey, can you change this? Can you not? 99% of the time, they're like, this is amazing. We cried. We have no changes. So they automatically also have a copy of everything that's going to be said, and they have a copy to keep for posterity.
So they
Because
know
it's not about me. As much as I insert myself into this, I kind of see myself as the conduit, and like, the circus, conductor or what have you. Like, I'm just kind of the conduit, and sort of moving everything around, and performing the ceremony. But at the end of the day, it's not about me. I have no ego in this. It's about the couple. And I always go into every script that I write, and every couple that I work with, I always say, it's not about me, it's about you. So whatever you want, I'm going to deliver for you, whatever way I have to do that.
it's a great way to look at it for sure. Let's see. And kind of a follow-up question somebody had. You kind of answered it in that last one too. Have you ever had a situation where, somebody in attendance wasn't too happy with the present, with the ceremony, the nature of the ceremony? Have they ever approached you, in a negative capacity, or is it usually the couples, everybody knows what's happening?
Yeah, I think this is going to sound really kind of weird, but I have been told that I'm physically very intimidating. And so usually, like, family, I'm tall, I'm like 5'9", and I'm all like covered in tattoos, and people are like, oh my God, that crazy lady, even if they have those feelings, right? That being said, I'm like a big puppy dog, like, I'm nice, you can approach me, right? So I definitely feel like I've had, because I'm looking at the crowd of guests, and I can read people's faces and energies really well. Sometimes I'll like, oh, they're like freaked out right now. It's very rare that they would come up to me afterwards. I've actually found the opposite to be true. And I think because I personally do a really good job of explaining what I'm doing in the ceremony, I've had like grandmas or like older people who were very Christian. I can see, the cross and everything. They've come up to me after I've done a hand fasting, for example, and been like, that's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. What is that? Can you explain more about that? Or like, I've never seen that before. That's so interesting. Like, this is so unique. And I think if you go into it soft, and you explain what you're doing, and you do it with intention and a big smile on your face, I think 9 times out of 10, they're just going to be more intrigued than intimidated.
I like that too. Yeah. And you let everybody know what's going on. So it's perfect.
Yeah. And
Okay.
they may be freaked out, but they're not going to tell me. They'll probably tell the couple and be like, what was that crazy lady doing? And that's fine. But they've never followed up and said, oh, my Aunt Millie said you're weird. It's never any of that. So.
Okay, and I think we just have time for a couple more questions, so we'll try to go through these quickly. Do you offer vow renewals, and have you noticed people asking for them more lately, or?
I actually do a lot of vow renewals. I wouldn't say it's like the bulk of my business, but I do a lot of vow renewals. I also do a lot of non-legal ceremonies as well, not just hand fastings, but just sort of non-legal commitment ceremonies that don't involve the marriage license or any of that. I approach those in the same way. We just don't have the paperwork. But I think the vow renewal thing in particular, people sometimes, in the same way that many couples that come to me, this might be their second or sometimes third marriage, excuse me, and they want to do something different this time around. Very similar with the vow renewals in that they may say, I actually have a couple I'm working with in October, perfect. They're coming from Texas. They're amazing. They were like, we got married 20 years ago and it was like this Texas JP, like blue-eyed, cowboy boots kind of thing. And it was great, but it was like, not really us. And this time around, it's been 20 years and we want to do something that's magical and meaningful and by the water. And we've never been to Salem. And so we're doing a hand fasting for them to sort of renew those vows, but also kind of have a ceremony that 20 years later kind of reflects them more accurately and appropriately. And I think it's going to be really meaningful and powerful for them. Yeah.
Sounds gorgeous.
Yeah.
Let's see. And then last question. It's kind of a big question. Let's try to see how quickly we can answer it. How do you go about pricing your services? Do you have a specific range that you stay within? And how do you go about setting that?
Yeah. So I don't haggle. It drives me crazy. It drives me crazy to have like all these different sort of pricing structures. And I used to do that. So I have learned a lot over the last couple of years, since I've been having this business and running this business in terms of, I did a lot of market research. I tried to establish, okay, what are other officiants in my area charging? I happen to come from the Boston area. So things are, if you've read any articles about the cost of living in Massachusetts, people are kind of used to paying a lot of money. I think when I was first starting out, I definitely priced my services quite low because I wanted to get the experience. And then over time, each year I raised them a little bit. I most recently raised them at the end of last year. But I have a flat fee for any ceremony that I do. It doesn't matter if it's an elopement for just the couple, or if it's a wedding with 200 people, it's always the same. And at first I was like, oh, that's not going to go over well. Honestly, people are willing to pay it. And I don't charge extra, like for, if you want this unity ritual or 2 or 3 unity rituals, it's an extra $50 or I just don't have the patience to get into all of that. I value myself and I know what I bring to the table. And I know that what I do is special. So I'm comfortable just saying, this is what I charge. The only difference in that is October ceremonies, I charge more because October here in Salem, if you've ever been to Salem or think about coming to Salem, is, as I said, mayhem and foolishness. It's extremely busy. Running or being involved in any sort of event here in Salem in October, there's a definite added level of traffic, stress, all sorts of stuff. So I feel comfortable charging extra. I also got into a pickle because I was charging my normal rate for Halloween for Samhain, and I would get so many inquiries, and people were hounding me, asking me for Halloween weddings. And I was like, well, here's my thing. If I'm going to do a Halloween wedding here in Salem, I'm going to charge a lot because for me, it's also a personal holiday. It's a holiday it's like asking someone to do a wedding on Christmas Day, like to officiate, for me, it's very, so I have an upcharge. And so when someone asks me for a Halloween wedding now, I know that they're prepared to pay what I'm asking, and I don't negotiate. It's just the way it is. So I will tell you monetarily, I charge $600 for any ceremony that I do. And then October, it's $800 for Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays. Weekends are $1,000, and Halloween is $1,600. And it's working. So value yourself and value the services that you're bringing because you know your own worth. And in my experience, inquiries may slow down a little bit, but then they'll pick back up. And at least in my experience, when you're charging a little bit more than maybe you might even be comfortable with, the inquiries that are coming through typically are people who are serious about hiring you. They're not shopping around. So
Absolutely. That was
get off my soapbox now.
no, that was fantastic. Okay, well, that's about all the time we have. So thank you so much, Tara. That was fantastic. And thank you, everybody, for coming. If you enjoyed this class, be sure to attend one of our live events with Officiant Accelerator. Officiant Accelerator is an in-person event series by AMM in partnership with IAPWO, where you can learn how to deliver powerful ceremonies, build a successful practice in your community, and join a network of passionate wedding professionals in a city near you. So we'll be heading to New York City next month and Columbus, Ohio in December. Be sure to get your tickets as soon as possible at the AMM store or the Officiant Accelerator website at officiantaccelerator.com. So thank you all for attending, and thank you so much, Tara. That was a wonderful presentation.
Blessed day, everyone.
All right. And Jessica went ahead and put Tara's website in the chat. So if you want to go ahead and reach out and contact her, her website is there. She'll be able to send out the slides. So thank you, everybody, and have a wonderful Tuesday evening.